Yeah, I mean, I think we get some of our perfectionism from God, but it's like when we think we know better, like, no, 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 it has to be exactly just this way or else it's not going to work. If God did that with us, there'd be no mercy.
That's a good point. No, seriously, there's something really profound about what you just said. Yeah. Christ, and like what I started to do is like I stopped over a period of a couple of years. I stopped having a problem with the concept of Jesus. Like I was cool with the God thing, but just like my experience with Christians growing up was like this was like it's kind of corny, and nobody ever explained Jesus and salvation to me in terms of like um the necessity for it, the mechanics of it, because most Christians are biblically illiterate. Like that, and like even if they are,
They seem to take on like this very similar persona too, which I think we both noticed. And
and even the ones that are biblically literate, like a lot of them disregard the Old Testament and they don't look at the whole thing as like one big picture.
yeah, I said that for years. Why do I need the Old Testament? Like Jesus
Yeah.
came. Like,
But what's funny is like when I got interested in the Bible, it was because like I heard lectures from people like Jordan Peterson talking about like the phenomenology and the psychology of like the
sure.
biblical stories, and they put more emphasis on the Old Testament. And you know, like my journey to God being through developing a relationship with him through trying to get freedom from addiction and 12-step programs and stuff like that. I actually the Old Testament version of God was more appealing to me because it was necessary for me to like um conceptualize my struggles in terms of like something kind of like a war, like an adversarial type thing. Like there's something I'm up against. And in 12-step programs, like one of the things that is really important, and I think this is biblically consistent too, and just like in general is like there's this emphasis on personal accountability and responsibility, like taking responsibility for your action, because there's actually like no way to actually develop further as a human being like until you do that. Like
Yeah.
you're still a child. So um that's where the becoming more competent, the like stopping making excuses for anything and like taking full ownership of things is and how that correlates to the harsher or whatever
Oh,
God of the
justice.
Old Testament, yeah, the
Yeah.
justice aspect of his character was more appealing to me because I was like, oh, that's like I've actually experienced that, like that's right. But what's interesting is like the piece that I didn't get, that you don't get until you develop a relationship with Christ, is like the
The mercy.
yeah, and also like I think I went too far to the other end of the spectrum where I because I stopped having mercy for myself kind of in a sense, and that was necessary for me to do to like turn my life around and like start seeing success like with my business and like oh, I have a bright future now and like I'm achieving things, and like I stopped having mercy for other people and for myself it took a while, but it started to get destructive, like even in my relationship with myself, because like you were talking about with shame. And this thing happens when you start to develop a relationship with Christ where you get like that missing piece. Like I said the other day, like the best way I can explain it is like you start to feel like the emotions that God feels for other people. Um, you start to become really, really deeply grateful because you start to understand how he can, you start to believe that he can feel that way about you, even like no matter how far that you've fallen. And I don't know, it's really, so I do this thing now where like I've been doing increasingly more for the last couple weeks where I try to like it hit me in the car the other day. I was listening to this song and it's a I'm really picky with my worship and Christian music. Yeah, we've had conversations about this. Cause like this is like the point of the podcast and everything I want to do, like with music and the clothing brand now is like I want to try to make Christianity like not corny.
Make Christianity cool again.
Cause it's not though. And I always thought that's what kept me away from it for the longest time was like I think people need a little bit more of the Old Testament God because like he's kind of cool in a way.
Well,
His character's like way more broad than just like
yeah, I mean the idea that's not believable that turns certain people away is like all loving and ever merciful. Just all love, all mercy all the time. And it's not that way, and that's actually the state of liberalism. It's just all mercy, all love all the time. Come on in.
yeah.
Do as thou wilt. Everything's going to be fine.
And there's a time and a place for that, and that is something that's always true. But it's like
But he's also a just God, right?
he's yeah, and that's
I think
the
this
thing that's so I think um more people would be interested in Christianity if they this is kind of my problem with Christians is like I mean you look at like and this is not trying to compare me or you or anything but like you look at like the disciples and like who he picked like Paul was like a Jew that was murdering Christians like they're all like he picked like the worst most worldly people because he knew that like when he transformed them their testimony would be the strongest. And there's this thing with modern Christianity where the reason, like, even when I got into the 12 step stuff, um, in my baby infant relationship with God, I was really like, when I took a look at the 12 of them, like, people always talk about how, like, oh, the fourth and fifth step, like, making a personal inventory and, like, having to share all the kind of like confession, like all the deep dark shit I've done with somebody else. Like that's the thing I fear the most. What I feared the most was the third step and like turning my will over because I was always like, well, what if God turns me into like a Bible thumping Christian? I was like, that was my worst fear is like those people are so corny. But it's like I would make the case now that like those people that are like you were talking about the other day, you when you were serving this table, they were praying and it seemed so fake.
yeah, because it seemed like they all shared one personality. Like
Yeah.
they it was the
Yeah.
same that you see with like almost has like a culty feel to it. Like they all are, everything's great and thanks be to God. And it's like, yeah, it's good to be grateful. It's good to be happy. Like, and I'm happy for you if it's authentic, but it just seems like everybody's struggling with something. And it's like, there are differences in all of us. Like, we're all unique and have personalities. And I think God like intends for us to be
That's
different,
that's what he made us all different for a certain
not to like
reason.
conform to this.
And like, yeah, we're supposed to improve
Yeah, yeah.
on our like, if the things that are different about us are shortcomings, we're supposed to improve upon them and like align them with God, but we're not supposed to change who we are. And God also doesn't want you coming to him fake.
Yeah,
He
but
doesn't want you to like, this might like with worship music and stuff. And it's like,
I think the point is that if it's
he
something
wants you
that's,
to be honest
yeah, but I think that
because that's a real relationship.
that personality type that I'm talking about, that I think most people know what I'm talking about, I hope. It's something that like I could easily act like. I could easily go out into the world and pretend without anybody knowing that I wasn't that way, and I could fit right in with those people. Do you know what I mean? I could act like that. It's the same way that like I feel like some of that like corny country music, corny fake like fake country music, fake worship
Well, yeah,
music.
just
We
everything
could
that's on
go
the
and
radio now.
yeah, like we
Yeah.
could make that music. Because all they're
Oh, yeah.
taking is like the same basic tracks, same basic instruments, and singing the same basic melodies with different words.
Well, it's kind of like it's commodifying it.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like it's inauthentic when you're like when you go into whether it's uh the creative process of writing a song or whether it's like even like how you approach God. If you're like going, I'm gonna form fit this to be received a certain way, it's like that's not honesty. That's not authenticity. And you're actually by doing that, like if that's how you approach a creative process, you're not doing like, well, I'm gonna make the best thing that aligns with the way I see things and how God created me to see things. And
Yeah, like I think even in worship, like everybody is different, everybody's unique. I think it's important for people to come and worship together, but like not at the expense of your own personality, your own unique opinions. Like those things are supposed to be discussed and shared. There's, as we see from all the different sects of Christianity, there's all these different interpretations of things, right? But like if you're in one of those sects, like there is no discussion, there is no argument. This is what we believe. And there's a dishonesty to it, because I could behave a certain way in public outwardly, and you go to a church and act like some do. Not all Christians are like this, but and you would think like, oh, that's a good Christian guy. Like he's not struggling with pornography at all. You
yeah,
know, like he's purporting to be like this really like clean guy. Like meanwhile, like maybe I have an anger problem. You know, maybe my knee jerk reaction when Sharon is telling me about her fluffy cat and how much she loves him is to tell her to shut up. And the right thing to do isn't to do that, but it's also not to be like, oh, please tell me more about your cat, Sharon. You know, because it's not true. It's inauthentic.
yeah,
Um,
it's the right thing to do if that's. I think we're supposed to be more like Christ, and it's supposed to be a priority of ours to want to hear more about Sharon's cat.
no, I don't. I honestly don't. Nobody honestly cares about Sharon's cat. And Sharon needs to stop sharing about her cat.
We want to make Sharon feel like we care about her cat, but um Yeah, it's weird, dude. It's like the
Sharon needs to get out of the
there's
house
so many
more.
things I want to like. There's so many ways we should go with this, and I keep like this. Is the problem, dude. Is like you and I think way too tangentially,
I know,
and
dude.
then we need like a mediator. Where like you were going somewhere with that, like stop and go there. Um,
No, I just think it's look, if God wasn't looking for us to be unique and to have our own path to Him and to have testimony, right?
yeah.
Like you can't have,
That's you can't have testimony if what you're doing is like I don't think it's we were talking about this earlier, like I've been going to church regularly and like really trying to find a way to like be of service. And because I've like come to Christ recently, I'm like, well, how can I do that in a church? And I'm like, I'm starting to through praying and asking God for opportunities to help people. The things that he's sending me aren't coming from a church. Like when I started asking, I started running into people um, from 12 step programs that I'm not so much involved in anymore. And like, I just think I'm more, everybody's not made in a certain way that they are of their best use to the kingdom of God in a church. Not that they shouldn't, go to church and be involved in a church, but when you get to the point where it's like it becomes a priority of yours to like you actually feel called to Jesus and to the kingdom, and you get to a point where you're like you want to be involved in some kind of ministry or some kind of service it's not for everybody. Not everybody's made in the way that they're best suited to be doing that in church. Like God didn't you weren't put through or you didn't go through all the things that you went through to like for no reason. Like there's a point in your journey where your struggles, once you overcome them, they become an asset to you. And to pretend and to disregard them, like I don't think that everybody who's like a passionate Christian is supposed to do like if you're a music artist, now do like Christian music. Maybe what you're supposed to do is do worldly music so you can reach people who are at a certain point where they don't want to hear Christian music, but you create something that they experience that's like just so in partnership with God. You create something that they experience that's so profound to them or connects with them in such a way that it steers them a little bit more to God. You know what I mean?
yeah, like a stepping stone. Yeah.
And um so this is why I stay like I was so reluctant to entertain the idea of Christianity or Christ for such a long time was because I saw people who were genuinely appeared inauthentic to me. Um, a lot of it seemed kind of corny. It just didn't seem genuine. And I'm like, well, if I got to be like that, dude, I'm staying away from this.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like, I don't think like God doesn't. want everybody to be like that. There's no problem with those people. There's a problem a little bit with some of them if they're not being
Authentic.
honest,
Yeah.
aligning with truth, because that's an element of Christianity that we miss nowadays, is like the truth element of it, the defense of truth, the embodying truth,
Well, I
the
think.
authenticity. That's a sacred thing. But I'm like, nah, dude, keep me away from that.
Well, I think part of it is the meekness that we were talking about before. That you see guys. You see a lot of these Christians are very. I'm sure a lot of them are authentic. Maybe even most of them. I don't
Yeah.
know. But you see that they're very, Christ-like, and that they're loving, they're compassionate, they're usually very soft-spoken, kind people, but they're not the people that I would see if you told them, I don't believe in your God. I don't like, there's no way Jesus, like the Muslims don't believe Jesus was crucified, right? If you said that to me in public, I'm not saying that I would cause a scene, but we're going to have a very open argument. Like, I'm not just going to be like, well, you're free to believe whatever you want to believe, you know? Like, I don't feel like most Christians have that, like, you're denying the crucifixion of my God. Like, there should be, like, that should be insulting. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
No, I
Um,
know what you're getting at. There's this like and
you,
it's like, how much do you really, so that's the thing, is like, I don't know about, I guess it would depend on the way in which they said it. I wouldn't, I don't think it's a good thing to go looking for arguments, but I get what
No,
you
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in the past, I've
you
been in discussions with people where I basically was like, well, we'll just agree to disagree. And it's like, if you really believe, right, that your God, our God, came down in human form and suffered the greatest torment, humiliation, and death that could possibly and ever has been for us. And then for somebody, and we live in a country where they mock our God all the time.
yeah, I've gotten to a point where I'm not willing to tolerate the mocking anymore. The problem is like the embodying Christ in your response to it. And
Yeah, you can't
Christ
fly
isn't
off at the
always,
handle.
I don't know why people think it's like uh Christ would want you to like never disagree with people. But you got to ask yourself at a certain point, like, how much you like, if somebody, dude, we've been in physical altercations personally. Well, personally, you and I
Yeah, yeah.
still love you to death.
Yeah, I love you.
But like with other people in defense of each other,
Mm-hmm.
you got to ask yourself, like, if how much you actually have a relationship with Christ if you're not willing to defend him.
Yeah.
Would you say that about any of your family? Like if somebody's mocking your family, you're just gonna be like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, no, that would make you like, if your dad, somebody's like bullying your kid at school
Yeah.
and you do nothing about it, does that make you, what does that make you? Does that make you a good dad?
Oh.
Make you a good dad? You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
that's
like,
the thing, dude. I never called myself a Christian until I got to the point where I believed it enough that like if somebody put a gun to my head and was like, "Tell me that you believe that Jesus Christ didn't, like God didn't come to earth and die to save your
he
sins
was
and was
just a man.
resurrected 3 days later."
He
Yeah.
was just a
Tell me,
man.
like I didn't go say I'm a Christian until I got to the point where I'd be like, "Fuck you, pull the trigger." Because that's what taking up your cross and following him means.
Yeah.
there's a distinction between believing in God and being okay with the idea of Jesus and being saved and called to Jesus Christ. Those are two different things. Because if you don't believe in something enough that you're willing to die for it, then
You don't really believe it.
no, you don't. And it's also like the whole point of the taking up your cross and following me thing is because that's the only way we win the battle. That's the only way. Like, if you really think about it, everybody on being willing to die for what they believe is the only true way to beat evil.
Yeah, 100%. But that's why when you see like meekness in like general at the grocery store, it's perfectly like that is the way to be. Right. But it's like,
Yeah, it's situational.
yeah. And what I saw as a kid was that there just didn't seem to be like a great defense of Christianity. Like I saw mockery everywhere, you know, on the news, even like even in school, they're like openly like, well, you're not going to learn about God here. Here's evolution. You know, there was, and this is coming probably from, you know, Christian people even.
Muslims don't play that game.
Mm-mm.
And that's
Nope.
one of the things that I respect about them.
Yeah.
I don't, not that we should be we should go kill anybody or throw them off a
Yeah.
building for
Or
like denying Christ, but
fly
like
planes into towers.
there's yeah, dude, there's something to be said for that stance in defense of your God. It's like I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, it means you really believe it. I mean, they believe a lie, but you know, I think you know that's even in the Catholic Church, they started this Eucharistic revival because did some Pew poll research throughout a whole bunch of churches, and they realized that it was some crazy number, like 80 something percent of people, Catholics that regularly go to church, didn't believe in the Eucharist. Like they didn't, they just thought it like it's a symbolic, we're just coming to church every Sunday and eating a cracker. Like they didn't really believe it. And it's like, so you like that's a huge pillar of your religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I think what people especially today don't believe, even people that call themselves Christians, some of them, they don't believe in magic. And this is a magical world that we live in.
yeah. I don't know if I'd buy the Eucharist thing completely, but the fact that there is a that rituals and sacraments have a tangible effect in the spiritual realm
Yeah, yeah.
and change the material fabric of reality is like you actually like can't be a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or really anything unless you believe that, because like what is prayer? This is like so this is what's so weird to, and I think this is not that there's like an orchestrated human conspiracy to any large degree. I think there is in a sense, but I think this is a demonic agenda because there's like when I when I came to Christ, one of the things that struck me as so weird, like when I actually started reading the Bible and like figuring out what was going on, um, and believing it, what struck me as so weird was like with the Old Testament, there's this like kind of like this dispensing with all of the stuff that's like too fantastical to make any sense. But so like you're doing that on one hand, but then you believe that God, the Holy Spirit, impregnated Mary by some mechanism, and she gave birth to God and also simultaneously his son that grew up, went around performing miracles, casting out demons, was crucified, and his sacrifice paid the price for all of our sins to save us. And then he came back to life 3 days later after he was killed. You believe all that, but you believe there's something about prayer that works, but you dispense with the other stuff, and then you pray as if, well, maybe this will happen.
I hope.
It's very it's very odd, the like the cognitive dissonance of being like, well, we collectively believe in all these certain things that are mystical and metaphysical, but then in actual practical application, we don't actually believe them. We're like as if we're in like this kind of like victim position.
I mean, we're more inclined to wear a shirt for the first time and have a really good day and have something great happen to us. And
Than
then
we
call
are to
that,
believe that like when we pray, it actually changes the material fabric of reality.
yeah, we're more inclined to believe in the lucky shirt or the crystals on the windowsill soaking in the moonlight than
Mhm.
we are from like seeing examples in the Bible of like, no, actually, if you just had faith in God and prayed about it and brought him your problem, knowing that he said that he was going to help you and acknowledging that in your prayer, like, God, surely you would help me with this, and be honest. Don't be like, well, I'm having this issue with my wife, but I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Right. And she's just not receptive, but to be honest about it and then receive an actual, and that's just like a baseline. But, the Bible says like you could literally move a mountain if you had the faith of a mustard seed.
Mhm.
Like he's telling you, if you had the faith to pray as if, like, I know because you said that you would do this thing and you're not a
Yeah.
liar, you're going to make it happen. That there's a bargain, right? I need to hold up my end as your follower. And maybe the way to get to that thing I'm asking is going to put things that I don't like in my path to get to it. But to have the faith that, like, I know that I have to overcome these things and that at the end of it, even, that it's going to be as I've requested, as I've prayed for.
Yeah.
It's much easier for some reason to be like, "This is my lucky hoodie. Good things are going to happen to me today."
Yeah. Christians aren't taught, and I think this is like very biblically consistent if you start reading it through a certain lens, that we we're given authority through Christ, but given authority and dominion over this earth and the spiritual realm. Um and like there's so many examples of this, like not even just in the like all throughout the Bible, but like the one you were just talking about with the mustard seed, and like a lot of the parables that Jesus speaks in. The
Which I
mustard
got
thing,
from you, by the way, from our conversation yesterday about how to pray.
well, yeah, I think there's a way. I do, man. I think there's a way in which you're supposed to do it. This isn't my idea, but
No,
like
but you
I've,
were sitting there backing it up like with your Bible, and it clicked for me that I've been up until yesterday, I've been praying wrong my entire life.
We're supposed to pray with authority. Whereas like we're you're supposed to you're supposed to look at God like he's an actual dad who, yes, wants you to live by his word and subordinate your life and thoughts and behaviors to him because that's the best way to do it because he knows better than you. But like Christians look at things in this weird, like, they look at God in this weird, like, authoritative way. It keeps people away from Christianity. It also keeps Christians in this, like, victim position where they're like, no, you're supposed to look at him like he's your actual dad. And what your dad actually wants you to do is grow some balls and realize that you have the power to get out here and do like real serious things because he gave you that power. Like God wants you to participate in the family business of stewardship of his kingdom that he gave you the dominion and authority over earth and the spiritual realm to do.
And it's the only way that the mercy makes sense. It's the only way that the forgiveness aspect makes sense is why, if we are so imperfect, would God forgive us? Why would he still love us? Because he's our father. It's the same thing. Your kid can screw up in unimaginable ways, but if he comes home and he apologizes, what do we want to do? Because we love him. If he's your son, you want to forgive him. You want to take him back home, right? Without that understanding of it, that type of love, the story wouldn't make sense. Because it didn't to me for forever. I struggled with that shame. Like, why? Why would God love me after all the awful things I've done? But, I gave you this example before. Like, my mom took me in, and I didn't even question it, why she would take me in. Of course, she would take me back in. I'm her son, right? When,
We struggle with grasping how God could.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, in regards to, I don't know, this is what I had to grasp to really be open to the idea of Christianity because it, like, one of the things that kept me away from it for so long was like this weird emasculating aspect of it.
yeah, the meek
Yeah.
cry. Yeah.
And man, you look at, I would invite anybody to like honestly challenge me on this. And it's not even like these aren't ideas that I've come up with, but you can't, like, if you look at any of the figures in the Old Testament, you look at Abraham, you look at Moses, they're going to God. When they talk to God, when they pray, what they're doing is they're holding God to his word and they're having an active, like, dynamic relationship with him as if he is an actual being, like you and me sitting here, like an actual dad. And they're going like Abraham, when God goes with Sodom and Gomorrah, he's like, I'm going to destroy the city. And Abraham is talking to him. He's like, well, surely be it far from you that you're the type of God that would destroy an entire city say I could find 50 innocent people there. And then God's basically like, yeah, you're right. Okay, if you can find 50, I'll spare the city. And Abraham talks him down the whole way to like 5 people or whatever. And it, he's he's holding God to God's word, like who God says he is and his character, and he's stepping into his authority, and he's changing the mind of God. And there's this thing, like, I think, like, if you have a dad, like, there's not a dad on the planet who, we were talking about this the other day, but say like you grew up playing football. There's not a dad on the planet who, like, when you're 5 years old, you start out like throwing the ball back and forth in the yard. And then, years go by. At a certain point, if you get to the point where you're able to like really contend with dad in level of skill, it's like, or like a coach on a football team, like you're like, he's going to trust you with a better position on the team. He's going to, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah.
like God wants you to contend with him, not in like a
Not adversarial.
adversarial
Yeah.
way, but if your heart's in the right place, if you have enough favor with him, if he trusts you enough, like he will actually, and it's in alignment with him, he'll actually give you anything that you ask for. Like
Yeah.
if you said, give me, if you prayed for $1 billion and he knew your heart was in the right place and he could trust you, and your vision was in alignment with his, and like it would actually like build a part of his like he might not happen today, but at some point you're going to get $1 billion. Like
Yeah.
this is, and like nobody can convince me otherwise. This is like where the ideas of um manifestation and like the law of attraction and all that bullshit come from. Like it started with the Bible. That's all biblical. The problem is, like, unless you're aligning it with God, like
You're using it illegally.
you
You're using it
yeah,
illegally. Yeah. You're
you're
trying.
you're using the authority. You're driving a car without the license.
Yeah, and you're gonna
And
crash
the
it.
license is Jesus.
Yeah.
That's where the authority comes from. And it's like, and that also, I mean, this will be a good segue. Um, Not segue. This will be a good transition into the
Oh,
altars episode and the spiritual mechanics, the mechanics of the spiritual realm and how that stuff works. But um, God set up laws and processes by which reality works
mhm.
and the spiritual realm works. And he's a just God, so he's not going to change those laws. That's why you see him doing all these, when people are like, they have a problem with God because they're like, well, how could he be an all good God if he like let this happen? It's like, well, God doesn't in creation set up the laws and mechanics by which things operate. And then when there's an adversary that tries to dick with his plan, God doesn't come back and go, well, I'm going to change all the laws now because
Well,
it doesn't suit me right now. Because then he would not be a just God.
yeah, well, something else that people don't often talk about is most of the evil that's perpetrated in the world is done by man. Most of the suffering in the world, if not all, is caused by man. Um, like, so basically, in order to stop the evil in the world, you would have to take away our free will.
Yeah.
Uh, Most of my trauma was caused by other human beings. I've caused plenty of trauma through my bad actions. But I don't know that you can point at any event in the world other than like natural disasters that occur, most of which though that occur regularly in specific areas that people choose to live in. You know what I mean? You live in a place where they get hit with hurricanes every year. I mean, it's not, you knew what was coming. You chose to live there anyway. It's very rare that it's like, I, I, I mean, incredibly rare that, you're in the middle of a rainy area and there's a drought that kills thousands of people. You know what I mean? Most of the evil, awful suffering of the world, almost all of it, is created by man's decisions.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too political on this particular episode, but people need to like really be careful of what kind of what's motivating their what are the underlying things driving their political ideologies and orientations, because like you said something really important there, that's like there's a correlation there between what you said about free will and like the whatever spirit is um manifesting itself in certain people's political ideologies, because what people don't understand is the only way to make things completely equal and great for everybody, like we're all trying to do for some reason endlessly, is to get rid of freedom of choice and free will. And that's actually tyranny. That's not, there's nothing in that that's aligning with God. Like God didn't create everybody the same to be robots. Um, and God's also not responsible for the way in which the world turns out, because we have an effect on that. Like you said, most of the evil is created, like God didn't want it to be this way, but he's not going to go back to the beginning and change all the mechanics of the ways in which things work.
No, because there's, I mean, if you look at it,
Because that takes our role in this out of everything.
well, and if you
There would be no point
acknowledge,
to creating us
well, if you acknowledge that,
if we didn't have the power of creating things. Like what?
well, and if we are living everlasting lives, right? Like to go back and start again at the drawing board would be to kill off all of those that indeed are supposed to live forever. You know, um, there are people that succumb to wickedness, that never break free of that wickedness, that succumb to their trauma, that become traumatizers and never, ever break free of that cycle. There's people that, in defiance of God, go to, whether it's some sort of paganism or it's basically all the same demonic things. They're looking for something here on earth to satisfy themselves. And if we look at these people that use those practices, none of them are happy. None of them are peaceful. They have everything that anyone could supposedly ever want, but they're miserable. That's very short sighted. This is all that there is, that YOLO, you only live once. True, yeah, but it's an eternal life if you choose it. Um, this notion, I guess, that this is all that there is. If this is all that there is, then being selfish and evil is the most logical conclusion. And if you take it from a scientific perspective with evolution, we should have destroyed ourselves by now, if not for Christianity, if not for trying to go out into the world and leave it a better place than you left. It's a Christian thing, and it's a moral thing that we all have instilled in us. And I think to your point, like, everybody thinks that they're the good guy. I don't think there's very many people, whether they're traumatized, have become the traumatizer. Even most people that are traumatizing people as we speak do not believe that they are the bad guy. Everybody thinks that they're good. Everybody thinks they're either doing right by number one. And then there's a lot of people, especially in this country, Christian and not, liberal, conservative, that may be doing the wrong thing, thinking that like they're trying to end suffering. You know, they're trying to do something good, but without aligning that purpose with God, you're surely going to fail.
Yeah, because what happens is you start to look at the landscape of reality as made up of victims and victimizers.
Yeah.
Like this is what's at the fundamental root of our this weird political ideology stuff that's going on with the left in this country that has come out of communism and Marxist ideologies. Like you start to, if it's not aligned with God, you start to become possessed by this lens of like looking at yourself and everything else as everybody's victims. It's weird. And like,
And your trauma is an excuse for any amount of behavior.
yeah, well, you don't. It becomes hard for you to see yourself as like the perpetrator of anything. Like this is like, I mean, Lucifer thinks
He's the good guy.
right.
Yeah, I just think it's, more to your point, I guess. And even circling back to like the mercy versus justice thing, it's, the right historically is more about justice, justice, justice. What's the rule of
And
law?
that can go too far.
Yeah, yeah, of course it can. They used to hang
I think
people.
that's what's happening right now, actually.
Yeah, I think
There's
that's what
this
we need to be
pendulum
careful
swing.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why I'm like real wary of, I hate talking about politics with anybody but you because this thing happens where they're like if you say something negative about or like implying that um us supporting like Israel's agenda is like a could be a bad thing,
Yeah.
then people go like immediately it's like there's this polarity thing that happens where it's like, well, Hamas needs to be dealt with though, right? And it's like we weren't talking about Hamas. You know what I'm saying? It's like I wasn't trying to make a just because I'm like critical of one thing doesn't mean I'm in favor of the other thing.
Yeah, but you
The
should be
same thing
able.
happens with Trump. Like
Yeah, you
I'm not a fan of
stole
Trump.
the words out of my mouth.
You can't, but bro, you can't like talk about, you
Well,
can't be a conservative without people assuming like,
but that's the whole sports team dynamic that.
I'm very wary and suspicious of Trump and the right now because I think there's some weird stuff going on where it's like, it, there's like this spiteful back and forth thing that happens. And it's like, that doesn't go anywhere good.
Yeah,
Even if like you're, more of the stances that your party has like align with objective truth. Like even if that's the case, it doesn't mean like you're by default right.
it doesn't mean that you're not going to be guilty of sin along the way. Everybody has egos, everybody's looking out for themselves. Politicians in general, like, what amazes me, I saw this video. It was this old Chinese language lady, and they were interviewing her, like, what's the most surprising thing about coming to America? And she was like, the most surprising thing is that people here watch the news. She's like, in China, we're forced to watch the news, but we all know it's propaganda. Here, people watch the news like to get the truth. Like they don't know that, but like no matter what news channel you're watching, they're lying to you.
No, they watch it because they get off on it.
Yeah, yeah, but
It's like
it's
that Tool song. That's all. Seriously, it's this like vicarious like uh they most people. This is the problem. Is like you pay too much attention to politics. Our brains are wired a certain way. What starts to happen is you start to, even if it's negative emotions, or it's like norepinephrine or like neurotransmitters that cause like an anxiety response, like your brain starts to get addicted to those things. And then you're like, you become like rewired to, you're getting upset for entertainment.
yeah, it's what I
That's a lot
call
of it. What
programming.
it's a lot of what it is.
But the other thing is like I use the sports team analogy a million times, but and I also think, I mean, this is two separate things. One, they've been using sports in America and changing rules in football and um, setting like dicking with the sports to like allow cheaters to win to demoralize us. But like, if I was a Patriots fan, for example, right, and Tom Brady got caught cheating in one Super Bowl, his coach got caught cheating in another. Years ago in America, if you're playing in a championship game and you got caught cheating and you won, they're going to say, give us back the fucking trophy. Nobody won that year because you cheated. So nobody, no, like it's going to go in the books as nobody won that year because these assholes cheated and they wouldn't have been allowed to show their faces because they disgraced the integrity of the sport. Right. But it's happened in baseball with, I forget who had secret cameras at the World Series or
Yeah.
whatever. But if you're a fan of that sports team, you're like, Tom Brady's got 6 rings. Like it's fine. To everybody else, we know you cheated. It's the same thing. Like if you're a Democrat and the Democrats do something like objectionably like wrong, like objectively wrong, you're like, oh well, they had to do that. They had to do that. They're still on, we're still good though. It's the same thing when Trump does stuff like he apparently agreed that we're going to take over ownership of Gaza and rebuild it. It's like, well, um, objectively, that's not the right thing to do. When he talked about in order to stop illegal immigration, he wants to force this digital ID thing for all Americans. Like, well, that's an infringement of all of our privacy rights. Like, that's objectively not the right thing to do. Right.
Yeah, I thought one of the I thought one of the things was let's quit sending money all over the fucking planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Where I
I can
think,
get on board with that. I knew this shit
yeah,
was gonna start going this way, dude, and I don't want to like jump the gun too early, but it's like, bro, I don't know that any of it's real.
no, what I think they're going to
I
do with this,
I don't know whether it's Trump or whoever else gets in office. Like I don't know that. I just don't know if any of it's real. I think a lot of it appears to me like a lot of it's done to give people the impression that like this person's coming to save the country, or this person's destroying the country, or like this is like, I think at a fundamental level they just want us to be at war with each other.
That, and I think there's a weird thing psychologically where like you see it with the stock market. Um, you see with a bunch of different markets, it's like, oh, nothing's actually changed, but like Trump's in office and like he's pro manufacturing. So, Trump's, the last time he was in office, the truck market went up, like freight market, nothing changed. And it's actually right now, it's supposed to be like at a low,
Yeah.
but rates just keep climbing.
Entire economic sectors are like changing just based on the idea that Trump is back in office.
Yeah. And it really goes to show like,
It's all psychological.
yeah,
Yeah.
it also, our money's just imaginary.
Yeah, it's not real.
So everything moving forward that happens, it's like, if people really realized that like their perceptions of things were what was really driving the economy, nothing else, just our collective perception of like whether we're excited or worried was literally the driving indicator of the
It
economy.
is,
I think, that's
because
that's
there's nothing backing the currency. It's a fiat currency.
yeah,
It's not backed by gold anymore.
no.
It's created out of thin air
It's literally, you know,
with the promise that our government will pay back the Federal Reserve at interest. So the money's actually debt. It's not just nothing, it's also debt.
yeah, but
So
it's made up. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like the entire thing is,
Yeah, even if it is backed by something, it's still not real.
yeah, I
The
mean,
value that is placed on it is what we attribute to it.
at least with gold, it seemed to be easier to be like, well, if I had this much in gold, is the house worth that much? No, I'd keep the gold. And like that's what kept,
It's less manipulatable.
yeah. Because for some reason we inherently like can look at gold and be like, oh, that's a lot of gold, that's a lot of money. I'll take the gold over the house, Like there's some inherent thing with gold where we're able to look at it and be like, but without that, it's like, are housing prices ever going to go back down? Depends. Will people's perceptions of what used to be 50,000, people are now willing to pay 150,000? But it's like, with the advent of like the stock market, the communist mechanism that it is, it's almost like a bastardization of like your faith, because it's literally a stock's value is just based on a whole bunch of people's faith in that stock. And that's what either causes it to rise or fall. Um, and again, it's like everything seems to be like a bad copy of like intrinsic universal spiritual mechanisms.
It is. We're gonna do an episode on this, but that's why it's important to understand the dynamics of the battle going on in the spiritual realm, and that there is a battle in the first place, because churches don't like talk about this. Like, we know there is, but then we like don't think about the fact that there is. It's like all the enemy is trying to do, because Lucifer doesn't have the power of creation, um and demons don't have any authority here, is, that's why they're so interested in us and access to us and getting us to um turn over our authority. Like, there's a war going on, and like the enemy cannot create all he can do is try to counterfeit God's creations. So there's kind of like this, when you see anything that's like that appears like a perfect example of this is like the I don't know what I would even call it, the equality movement or whatever, the progressive thing. And I fell into that when I was, in my teens too. It was like I thought this was a great idea. Um, that whole thing is like when you see something that's like really close to like you were saying, like it's really close to God, but it's just like a couple steps off. And those couple steps, like if you scale that over 10, 20 years, implementing like the values of a belief system in a country, like you end up like just, just like way over here. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
off
saying?
in
Where
left
we're
field.
like, but that's a good indicator of something that might be demonic. Like we know this whole thing, all of these movements, dude. BLM,
Yeah, it all sounds good in the
um,
beginning
it's like all these things, like
because you can't argue. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, of
yeah.
course they do. Yeah, who could be against that but a racist and a bigot?
But all these little movements, they're like it's a good indicator of whether or not something is demonic when you like look at it and it appears like really close to like some kind of like divine principle, but the fruits of it end up being, it's almost like it's almost like you said, it's close to like a copy of like what God would say or want, but it's not quite there. And then like when you start to implement it, the fruits of it are like this thing that's like destructive
Anti-human.
or anti-human,
Yeah.
like all of these movements, the feminist movement, abortion, it's like all these things.
I think it's interesting how you can kind of use the metaphor like even like as adults to God we act like teenagers where when you're a kid you're looking at the way your parents are running things and you're like I could do better than this. They're fucking this up. They're fucking that up. Like I know better. And you're looking at the world's screwed up. You're like the answer's so easy. Like I could fix this, you know? And so people they end up like getting together under like something that seems like a real simple concept, like they see an injustice or inequality and they're like, yeah, we could fix this. But it's like without God, it's almost like, you'll use 90% of like a biblical principle, but be like, yeah, but this, I disagree with this 10%. So we're going to change it just a little bit. And we're going to really fix this problem. And then you end up with like, you know, down the road because you weren't aligned with God, suddenly it's like everybody's just murdering their babies. And instead of even just calling it that and having the discussion, like, yeah, in certain circumstances, that should be fine, maybe. Or just having the discussion, suddenly it's gotten to the point where it's like, no, you're not. If you even try to have a discussion about it, you're anti woman. You're against a woman's rights. Um, and you're a piece of shit. And you shouldn't have an opinion. It has nothing to do with you. Um, when it's like, if we were honest, like brutally, hurtfully, potentially honest about what the thing was that we're doing and talking about, which is murdering a baby.
Like if we just said out loud what the actual material thing is.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
if you can't even be honest about that, what do you think the outcome's going to be? It's the authenticity thing all over again.
Yeah. I would like for people to talk about it in that way. If you want to have a conversation about abortion, first say what it actually is,
Yeah,
and then tell me why you think you should have the right to murder a baby. It's something like 3%, I think, of abortions are cases of like incest, rape, or
life-saving care.
yeah, um, whether it's pre-existing medical conditions or like some kind of circumstance where the mother's in danger. Um, I think it's like what 3%.
Yeah, but
It's like less than five. So
even that
you're
number.
talking like 95, 97% of abortions are like the case actually is like you had the choice before you decided to sleep with somebody who you knew you wouldn't want to have a baby with, or you decided to engage in an act that you know results in babies, because that's the whole point of the act in the first place. And
Well,
you
one
weren't
of
at
them.
a position in your life to deal with the consequences of that action. So, like, really, there's you look at all these things, dude. The abortion thing, the trans movement, the climate stuff. There's something weird and anti-human underlying all of them. Like it was either last year or the year before in Ireland, the Irish government tried to um there's some kind of legislation they were trying to pass through. They voted on, I don't know if it got passed or not, to cull CULL 200,000 cattle because like to reduce methane emissions and the impact on the climate that could potentially have. So like we're to the point in all of these things. It's like, so we're sacrificing cattle to change the weather. This is a
Yeah,
complete Jordan Peterson plagiarization, but it's like, it's one of the most profound points that I think somebody's ever made about these issues is like, or an observation. It seems like we're back in pagan times where, and you know, you might not be, uh, it's like abortion's child sacrifice, dude. At a fundamental level, like you may not be
might not be your intention.
yeah, but it doesn't matter cuz like there's an exchange happening and like what
Mm,
you're doing is like you're sacrificing the baby you
yeah, but
to get to sacrifice the baby in order to either get your life back or preserve your finances or any of these, like you look at these gods of the Old Testament, like Moloch, what they were getting in exchange was like they were receiving payment for the child in some way, shape, or form. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
but what's interesting to me is that you're also doing that after, in many cases, some sort of traumatizing and humiliating act, right? Which is sex out of wedlock, sure, but it's probably not some loving, caring, I love you, want to spend the rest of my life with you and become one with you kind of sex either, is it? No, it's probably some perversion of the sexual act, right? In which one or both parties was humiliated. The woman usually is traumatized and hurt the most by this.
yeah, I think these things are, I think we downplay the extent to, we've normalized them so much we don't understand that these things are actually traumatic.
Well, if we were just monkeys, it wouldn't be traumatic. If this
Right.
is just evolved monkeys with sexual urges that we act on,
That's a really good point.
you know. But
That's not traumatic for animals. This is a good creation argument.
Yeah,
I've never really thought about it in that way.
but that's when I stopped having sex out of wedlock, is the time that I realized, like, first of all, the type of sex we're having, I'm degrading the woman. The woman is asking to be degraded. And then,
Usually alcohol is a prerequisite too, so it's like, let me dim my consciousness
yeah, let me
so that
welcome something else.
I can engage in this act and
Yeah.
not be fully there for it.
Yeah, yeah. So then I don't have to accept responsibility. And two, I can be overcome with something
But
or
it
by
also kind of
something.
implies that it's traumatizing in a sense.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like if it's like let me, I'm not super proud of this thing I'm doing. There's an element of that where it's like, and it's subconscious. We don't realize it's happening, but it's like, let me,
yeah, for sure.
ingest this so I'm not fully there for the experience. It implies some kind of
Trauma. No, I mean, I looked in the girl's eyes and I could see, like, enjoying herself on some level, yes, but when you looked into her eyes, looked into her soul, like, never again. It was the first time I realized, like, what is actually taking place in those situations. And it's, if you accept the identity of a child of God, even before doing that, if you just accept the girl's identity as like somebody's daughter, it's like it's an awful
the
thing.
word God uses is defiling,
Yeah, but
actually.
that's what it is. But you're defiling not only someone else, you're defiling yourself and your own nature. Um, because at the end of the day, like, is that either of our heart's desire? No, then why are we doing it? Because really, everybody's heart's desire, and people can lie about it all they want, but we all want love, right? We don't want to be hurt, though. And so somehow not wanting to be hurt by opening up and being loved and loving somebody else, somehow the better thing to do is to go defile and be defiled, because that hurts maybe slightly less because we're told by society that that's okay.
I believe that everything essentially is a ritual or a sacrament
Yeah.
of some sort.
And everything's interconnected. Like, not to drive myself crazy, but I do sometimes. Like, even our smallest decisions of, like, you see something wrong, whether it's a piece of trash on the ground, you go to the grocery store and the carts are all fucked up. Like, you see something, you could fix it, and you're choosing not to. All of those things are interconnected. Like, for your own soul and for everybody around you, because for yourself, you're going to grow in, like, doing the right thing and, like, recognizing when things are wrong and training yourself for that to be a call to action to do something. But also for others, the people that that caused that by just whatever, are going to see you. Even the people that didn't have anything to do with it, they're going to see that act. And that's part of the whole embodying Christ, and, like, what Paul meant in his letter, I think, to the Ephesians. He was writing a letter where he told even the slaves, don't rebel against your masters, but live and orient your life this way. It's the idea that, like, you see somebody doing the right thing and it
As a
feels,
ripple effect.
well, there's a hope too. Like, it's an inspiring thing. It's a small thing, but seeing people stop and give money to the homeless guy that's been standing there for 7 hours, seeing people do the right thing, suddenly you don't feel like, you start to believe that we're in this together. You start to believe that goodness can win. But if you just give up and you say the world's fucked, you know, people aren't turning to God, this is hopeless, and you do nothing, like, I guess what I'm saying is that, and it's kind of corny, but if you want to change the world, like, you have to start with yourself.
Yeah.
And when people are going to see that, like when you turned your life around, the people in your life saw that. And now suddenly, like, when people have problems, they want to come to you, you know? Um,
There's also like it's like regardless of what thought pattern you're subscribing to or what pattern of behaviors you're orienting what belief system you're orienting your life by or what you're engaging in like behaviorally on a daily basis, you're kind of you're powering an altar to some degree. And when you do that in a way that's like aligning with Christ and you're like in alignment with the altar of salvation and making the sacraments, um, you're making the offerings to that altar. Um, there is a tangible, visible energy that starts to shift in you that people can feel and see and receive, and it has an effect on the world. And the same goes with um, the inverse of that. And I just don't think people think about the things they do in that way. There's a lot more gravity to everything that you do than we realize there is.
Enough to drive you insane, honestly. If you think about, like, just how much effect, like, the small actions of, like, even a single person have on the people around them, it's monumental, and it's perception shifting too. To be, in the presence of, like, a really good man working alongside it. Whether you work at a grocery store, you work at a mechanic shop or whatever, it can change the entire culture of a place. To be in the presence of that and to want to match that energy. Like, and these are things that I'm trying to kind of rally your points with, things that, like, people have all kind of experienced,
Yeah.
whether it's been
No,
fleeting or
like
not.
I see
Um,
you.
and see, like, there is power in it, and that you have power in yourself to do those things. But a lot of people feel hopeless, like, oh, like, can't make a difference.